Hey guys, what is up? How is everybody doing today?
Good, how are you?
Good. Sorry, my voice is a little bit gone. I'm in a band, and we had a guy come in from out of town who was in our band years ago, and so we played for like 3 extra hours last night. So
Gee.
I did an awful lot of screaming. It looks like we got 3 people on here, and we got a couple of people watching. I imagine more people will join here shortly. Oh, good. Here's somebody else. All right, well, since I'm going to try to keep this to an hour today, and then going forward, I'm going to try to do these once a month, and I figure if we do them once a month, an hour should be good to get some questions and conversation in. So I'll go ahead and get started. I've got a whole ton of questions that I got in through email, and I'll watch the live chat stream. And for you guys that are here actually joined to the Hangout, feel free to chime in. I'll try to ask you for your input as we go, because I'd love to hear more opinions than just my own. All right, so the first one, really easy question. I got somebody who asked, is your name Mike or Sylvan? So if you're on the Facebook group, I post everything under the name Sylvan Monroe. And that's really just because I'm trying to keep my personal life and this channel separate. There's an awful lot of people who I know from work and from my personal life who would think I'm a little nuts and who really aren't into this kind of thing. So my Facebook name is Sylvan Monroe, and that's just a combination of 2 authors I like, Sylvan Muldoon and Robert Monroe, and I just combined them together. So that's all that is. If you see Sylvan Monroe on there posting, that's me. All right, so the our first real question about content here. What are your thoughts on the afterlife? I'd actually like to open that up and get your guys' thoughts on that before I comment on it. What do you guys think about the afterlife?
I personally think the afterlife is thought-based.
Thought-based as in like William Buhlman and how he describes it, where there's consensus realities and you kind of build this environment that you want to live in, that kind of idea?
Yeah, pretty much. I feel like when you die, whatever you think you're going to go to, that's what you're going to experience. Whether it be you think you deserve to go to hell, you deserve to go to heaven. So yeah, I definitely think that.
Anybody else want to throw in their 2 cents?
Yeah, I'll put my opinion out there. I mean, I've had a Roman Catholic background my whole life, so that's kind of where my basis on the whole heaven hell kind of thing came in. But obviously, as soon as I've kind of opened myself to this whole kind of experience, the thought-based thing has kind of been where I've been coming from too. So I think really, yeah, I think the thought-based thing kind of hits the nail on the head right there. So.
Thank you. Hang on one sec. I'm getting comments that some of the sound quality of the microphone is bad. I'm going to try to switch from my headset microphone to my laptop. All right, can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Fran, how is that? Does that sound any better?
Definitely sounds better from my end.
Ah, good. Okay. All right, I just need to make sure I'm listening to it through my headphones so we don't get that feedback and the echo, but I'll just use my microphone on my laptop. So it looks like we have a wide variety of views on that. So I'm an atheist personally, and so I don't have any sort of religious background as far as heaven and hell and all of that. I like the idea that we have this ability to create everything via thought, after we die. I honestly have no idea. I just think that there's no way to find out without actually dying first. So that's why I wanted to get your guys' opinions on it. I had no idea at all. I really hope it's something else. I mean, I hope it's not just our ego that says we go on forever, but I'm hoping for the thought responsive kind of deal where you just have complete control like you do in the out-of-body state.
Yeah, I know Ryan Cropper actually just had some video he posted on some kind of afterlife concepts. I haven't gotten to see them yet, but I know some people claim they exist on the astral plane. I haven't seen what he said about it, so I'm interested in that too.
Well, what's interesting is I've run into people who claim that they're dead while I'm out of body, but not being able to prove that I really actually spoke to these people and that it wasn't some sort of
thought created image of this person is something completely different. So
Right.
yeah, I don't know. All right. How long does it typically take you roughly to get to the void state? So this answer has changed for me personally over the last couple of 3 years or so. So for those of you who don't know, the void state is just, it's like the mind awake body asleep state. Some people call it trance. Some people call it focus 10, I think is what Robert Monroe called it. And it's basically just this disassociation from your body where you are, it feels like you're floating in this black void, and it feels very, very spacious, I suppose, like in your head. It's almost like you feel like you're in this big wide open area, and your senses tend to become muffled because your attention's turned more inward rather than outward. And that's typically the point where I will start doing some sort of visualization type techniques if I want to bring about the vibrational state to initiate an exit. And so the question is, how long does it take to get to that state? In the early days, it took between 45 minutes and an hour to get my body to actually fall asleep, because you just got to lay completely still, and you've got to not scratch or move or, you know, change your breathing pattern or get too excited and all of these things. And it would take about 45 minutes or an hour before my body would just kind of shut down, and I'd feel that heavy lead blanket that would just roll up from my feet to my head. But since I discovered, and I know I harp on about this all the time on my channel and in the comment threads, but anybody who asks me, you know, how to speed this up, my answer is always micro sleep, because that's worked amazingly well for me. So micro sleep is where you basically, you learn to let yourself dip into sleep just for a brief second, and then you come back out again, and then you dip in again, and you come back out again, just through intent. And that takes some practice. But using micro sleep, I can get into the void state within like 15 minutes now. And so I highly recommend learning to do that. And it's good to practice in an uncomfortable spot or during the day when you're not as tired. But I highly recommend learning to do that. It cuts my whole mind awake body asleep process by at least half an hour. And that's fairly consistent.
I completely agree.
You agree?
I'm glad I heard you. Yes, I'm glad I heard you talk about that and watched your videos about that, because it's definitely helped me a lot too. I still mainly do it at nighttime, but sometimes I'll set my alarm every couple hours, and that really does help for sure.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear it's not just me, because I seriously tell that to everybody who asks. You know, I'm stuck. I get to this point, my body just won't fall asleep, and I feel like I've been laying there forever, and this is always my answer to it. And I know it takes practice. It took me like 6 months to get the hang of this, and I would practice during the day, during my lunch breaks at work, in the back of my van, and I would just wake myself up over and over and over and over again, and you try to get the hang of just bringing yourself back out of it through intent. So it's tough, but it's well worth the practice.
For sure.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I know I need to definitely put some more dedication into that micro sleep kind of thing, because I'm one of those folks that if I just try to do it straight from being awake, I'll just lay there. I never even feel the sleep paralysis or anything like that. So definitely need to put more work into it.
Yeah, you should. It'll make a difference, I'm sure. All right, let me see if there's any questions. Does drinking alcohol affect your ability to project?
Oh, yes.
So I got a couple of thoughts on that. So my first thought is, if you're not drinking a lot, you know, I've had great experiences after one glass of scotch, and I find it'll relax you, and it'll help me get into the more relaxed state more quickly, at least if I've had a stressful day and my mind just won't shut down. But I will say that any more than that, and you just completely blow your chances. And if you do have any sort of experience, it'll tend to be a very dark, lack of control, very hazy type of experience, and that's really not what you're going for. So that's my 2 cents. So you said, oh yeah, so you've experienced this?
Well, I've had like some experiences when I have had a few to drink, but yeah, they weren't that positive, and definitely didn't have control of them. And a lot of times I didn't have any at all if I had drank. I don't drink that often, but it definitely affects it in my opinion.
Yeah. So I think that's the general consensus. Drinking a little bit, maybe that's fine. I definitely have more success when I'm sober. I obviously have more success when I'm sober, but I mean, I have more success when I'm when I haven't drank at all. So I try to abstain from it pretty much most of the time. I drink maybe once a month tops. because I just like to give myself the best opportunity I can to have one of these experiences. All right, is there a mental state that we should be into more quickly? Example, happy, sad, good, bad, angry. Yes. Now this may just be a personal thing. I've talked about this a couple of times in the past, but I have far more success if I'm in a positive, content, I guess confident type state of mind. I have a very difficult time doing any sort of this practice when if I've just had a fight with my wife, for example, or if I've had a really rough day at work and I'm feeling down. And for those people that I know that can still project when they are in sort of this negative headspace, it tends to lead to negative experiences because everything is so thought responsive. So for me personally, I can't do it if I'm not in a happy, positive state of mind. And for those who can, what I've heard is that's not a really great result. So that's my 2 cents on that one. What do you guys think?
I would definitely agree that positive mindset is very necessary, as well as having just keep telling yourself you're able to do it rather than having any thoughts saying I can't do it or anything like that. Anything negative will have negative results because of the thought-based nature of this kind of thing.
I completely agree with you too. A lot of times I've been in a bad mood and didn't want to have an experience, and it forced me, it was trying to force me out of my body or something was. And I'm like, no, I don't want to, almost telling this invisible force that I don't want to experience anything because I know it's going to be negative. I've had a lot of negative experiences in the astrals as well as positive ones. I've learned to not be so scared of the negative experiences. I feel like, giving fear to whatever it is just makes it stronger. In the instance you show that you're not scared of whatever's approaching you that may be negative in the astrals, less power to it. And usually the experience will end. But yeah, definitely I agree with you there.
Yeah, definitely. All right, hang on. Some people are trying to get on the live chat. Hang on 1 second. The link is in the description of the video, but I'm going to go ahead and post it in this window here, I think. Let's see. Bear with me, I'm just getting the link to the live chat so people can join one moment here. So if you go to the my previous video where I actually announced this, it's in the description, but I've almost got it posted. It's being a little laggy. All right, so I'll go to the next question while this finishes coming up, just so we don't waste time. So what technique do you use, I'm assuming, to project? And I'll let you guys start on that one. I talk an awful lot about my whole, the sequence of attempts or techniques that I use when I try to get out of body. I talk an awful lot about that in my whole how to project playlist. So I'll let you guys start with that. What techniques do you use? What works for you? What doesn't?
Well,
go ahead.
You can go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Go on.
All right. Well, I'm gonna be completely honest. I have not been very successful at all. Really, the only experience I've had has been kind of spontaneous, but the closest I seem to get is really going more of an indirect route. I kind of try to do it through lucid dreaming, and because I never seem to be able to get myself really relaxed enough to be able to actually get out through the direct method. But yeah, I'm more of a indirect method kind of guy.
So when you make an attempt through lucid dreaming, what does that mean? How do you do that? You get into a lucid dream, and then what next?
I actually commented on your lucid dreaming video not that long ago. It was basically once I get there, I kind of just set the intent to get out, and I appear in kind of that void kind of state as I'm starting to wake up, and I try to kind of roll out from that state.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. I remember that conversation. Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
All right, Tasha, I think you were going to say something.
Can you hear me?
Maybe.
Hi? No?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, well, this is my first time never using Hangout, so I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm fairly new to it as well. Last time was my first, so this is my second.
All right. So, yeah, when I'm just talking about the lucid dreaming kind of thing, the couple times that I've been successful is I get into a lucid state, and then I think I can get on my body, and then boom, I'm out. It's just as easy as that for me, but that's only happened like a handful of times. That's all I had to say on that. I was just seeing if I could get on here. So how do I get off now?
Well, you don't have to actually jump off in case you want to continue to talk, but there's
No,
at the top,
yeah.
There's a mute, and then there's a turn your camera off as well. If you don't
Okay,
want us to
so if
sit
I hit
and-
that, I'm good.
Yep.
Okay.
There you go. Anybody else want to chime in on the technique that you use?
I practice with a bunch of different techniques. I've also had astral experiences through lucid dreaming, but I question whether it was like a lucid dream or indeed an astral projection. Usually when I realize I'm dreaming, like I'll fly off into space or whatever. Sometimes I'll come back to my room and it does feel like an astral projection experience. A lot of times when I'm just trying to enter the state, I just lay in bed and just relax, let my body fall asleep. And like I'll start drifting off. I'll start seeing images in my vision.
Yep.
And then next thing I know, I'll be floating out of my body.
Hey, Christopher, it looks like you've got your camera shut off, but it looks like you're not muted. I'm going to see if I can go ahead and mute you unless you want to do it.
All right, I'll mute my mic.
Perfect, cool. Yeah, thank you for that. So as far as the techniques that I use, like I mentioned, I talk about them in detail in my whole playlist, but I do change up from time to time because what I found is that it seems like if you stick with any one technique too long, it seems like it progressively becomes less effective, at least in my experience. And so I always start the same way. I always put my body to sleep. But then, you know, I'll cycle between different things. So lately, what I've been doing is I've been using that roller coaster method that I talked about in a previous video. And I've actually been spending a lot of time, you know, before bed watching that little virtual reality headset. And then I wake up in the middle of the night and then I do it again just to reinforce what that looks like in my head. And I've been using that to get out of body recently. Prior to that, it was primarily just based on the indirect method where I would wake up and I would focus on a dream that I just had remaining completely still. And I would just wait and start hearing the pulsating static until that would build up. So the underlying techniques, the direct method or the indirect method, it's always the same, but what I actually do to initiate the process tends to change over time. And then I'll end up circling back and going back to a technique that used to work again, because it just seems like variety is your friend in this practice. Actually, I do have a question on that. Have you guys noticed that? Is it the same for you where over time a technique becomes less productive and you have to switch it up once in a while? Or do you just find one thing and that just works for you forever?
I actually have a really good comment on that. I was using, I found this guided meditation kind of thing from Paul Santisi.
Oh, yeah.
One of those 3D sound kind of things. And the very first time I used it was probably the farthest I'd ever gotten from just trying to use the direct method. I had the really strong vibrations and every kind of thing. Anytime afterwards I tried to use it, I've gotten pretty much nothing. It's pretty much lost its effectiveness. I think it was just the new sound to me that it worked the first time, but it hasn't since.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that. It's changing up once in a while is worthwhile. But, you know, actually I should mention as well that in the early days, what I found is that I would try something once and then I would just jump to the next thing. I'd be like, oh, that didn't work, go to the next thing. Oh, that didn't work, go to the next thing. And I will say that there's definitely value in sticking with something for a couple of weeks, you know, minimum, just to make sure that it really doesn't work. When you read people like William Buhlman, he talks about how when he was developing the target technique that he uses, it took him 2 weeks of nightly practice to actually get it to do anything at all. And so if you're just jumping from one thing to the next without really giving the current technique or method a good solid try, then you're likely passing up something that potentially could work because you're just moving on to the next thing.
I completely agree with that. And I also think it's important not to get so focused on a technique. A lot of times that has ruined the experience for me. I find if I adopt a playful attitude about it and I accept that it may not happen, that it usually happens a lot more.
Absolutely.
That's a little pointer.
That is absolutely the case. One of the pieces of advice I've given a few times is that you got to learn to love the process. You got to learn to just enjoy the whole thing. And, you know, if you get out of body, then great, that's an added bonus. But otherwise, enjoy the meditation, enjoy the relaxation, enjoy the feeling of your body, you know, falling asleep in the void state. You got to just love all of it. And then, like you said, sometimes it'll happen and you won't expect it. And added bonus.
For sure.
All right. What negative effects does, what benefits and negative effects does projection have? Negative effects, personally, I would say almost nothing. I would say in the early days, it tends to lead to frustration quite a bit. And even to this day, it tends to lead to sleep deprivation once in a while, and I end up having to take a nap during the day. But I really honestly can't think of anything else negative to say about it. Have you guys had any negative experiences with projection?
Just negative experiences and being in lower realms and having things attack me and stuff like that. It can get quite scary at times. But again, I've had positive experiences too. But it can be scary. You have to learn to overcome your fear. You know, and a lot of people only have positive experiences, but I feel like it's good to experience both so that you can learn from both. But yeah, that's the only negative. And, you know, a big positive is you just don't question life after death. You don't question that you have a soul. You don't question that you live on. And which is a huge one. You know, there's no more fear of death at all. There's no question about it.
So question for you about your negative, well, you kind of answered this already, but your negative experiences. So are they really negative? I mean, so they might be scary, but in the end, do you wish that you didn't have those experiences? You said that you think that you should have the good and the bad, which I think is perfectly.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, you're good.
No, I appreciate those experiences for sure. It's just, you know, as far as like negative entities that I've encountered, that's pretty much what I mean by negative experiences. Seeing really ugly looking things that follow me back to my room and try to, you know, attack me in my bed and hold me down and do all this crazy stuff. But I still appreciate the experience, you know, for sure. I've learned to get over my fear of those entities when that happens. And I've been able to like imagine killing them or whatever, and like it's worked.
Right.
So I definitely appreciate the experiences for sure. It's helped me grow and not be so fearful. Even though I've had fearful experiences, I've learned how to overcome my fears.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with that. But no negative long-term side effects.
Definitely.
You know, some people talk about, you know, things coming back and following you and possessing your body and, you know, all these very fear-based concepts. And I can say I haven't ever come across anybody who's ever actually had that happen. People kind of preach it, but these aren't the people who've actually experienced it. They're just saying, you know, this is what I've heard can happen. And they propagate this idea of fear. But I can say I've never run into any long-term negative impact of, you know, using this practice.
Yeah, I've never been scared that anything's gonna possess me or anything like that. So
yeah, it won't happen. In fact, you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, I've been doing this for 3.5 years, but if you read somebody like Robert Bruce, if you read his treatise of astral projection, you know, he's got decades of experience, and he talks about how you don't ever actually you don't leave your body behind as like an empty shell. He says you're really in both places at the same time, and you're projecting your consciousness. But he talks about experiences where he's seeing his projected body from his physical body and seeing his physical body from his projected body at the same time and having this double awareness. And he says, you know, that wouldn't be possible if I'm just leaving my body as an empty shell waiting to be picked up by some kind of demon or some kind of, you know, entity or something like that. So there's people with far more experience than I have who confirm that this is also the case. It's just not gonna happen.
It's all the movies that make people think.
Absolutely.
Really?
All right, next. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add one quick thing. The negative, the possession kind of thing that comes up, whether it can happen or not, I question, but I think if it were going to happen, you would have to have full consent and you'd actually have to be letting it happen to you. It's not just going to happen by mistake. You would have to be intentionally getting yourself into pretty dark stuff, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I could agree with that. Yeah, if you believe in the whole concept of demons and possession and things like that, you know, I completely would agree with you that you'd have to be willing and open and saying, you know, here, have at it, kind of a thing. All right, let's see, a question in the comment thread. One moment. Let's see. Oh no, he's just making a comment, not a question. All right, how long does it take to learn how to AP? So there's no really great answer I can give you for this one. It took me a long time. I had my first experience the very first time I attempted this, and if you've watched my first video, you know that I was actually trying to prove that this didn't exist. And so in trying to prove that it didn't exist, I had my first experience. And then it took me 6 months to have another one. And it was incredibly frustrating because now here I know that this thing can happen and I couldn't make it happen again. And it took me 6 months. And finally I had another experience. And then it was every 3 or 4 months for like the next 1.5 to 2 years. And it took me really the better part of 2 years or a little over 2 years to kind of lay out the process that I have to go through to make this happen. And you know, one of the things that I did that I'll say that made a big difference is I actually started journaling everything. I was dream journaling at the time, but what I did is I actually started journaling everything that I would do, you know, leading up to my attempts, everything I would do during my attempts, how I felt during the attempts, you know, and you know what the temperature was like, and trying to keep all these detailed records. Like I got the idea from Robert Monroe. He did the same kind of thing. He kept track of even things like barometric pressure and phases of the moon. And so I was trying to do all of these things so I could kind of make a breadcrumb trail that I could follow in the future and say, well, this worked, this worked, this worked, this didn't work. So what can I replace that with? And I think I would have made it quicker if I would have had that idea beforehand, you know, sooner, you know, along in my practice where I really take time to analyze things and figure out what works and what doesn't work. But it literally took me the better part of 2 years to really get the hang of what works and what doesn't work for me. And I know other people who, you know, they do this for a week and they're like, oh, that's amazing. I got out 3 times. And those are the people that I've always been jealous of, or the people who, you know, they've been doing this since they were a kid and it just happens to them naturally and they don't even, there's no attempt required. They're just kind of thrust into it. That's a problem I would dearly love to have, but that's my 2 cents on that.
When I first started studying it, I had an experience within about 2 weeks, but I didn't have such a good experience, so that kind of scared me from having them for a little bit. But it did definitely only take me about 2 weeks to start having them fairly frequently, and it triggered memories of doing that when I was a kid. I just didn't know what it was. So about 2 weeks.
That's amazing. 2 weeks.
Yep.
I see some other people on the line, Jessica, Christopher, Thomas, and if any of you ever have anything you want to chime in with, go for it. Love to have you in the conversation. Otherwise, feel free to just keep listening. That's cool.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm kind of quiet today. I went to the U2 concert last night. I'm not feeling it.
Well, then just feel free to just listen. Then you're fine. I just wanted to make sure you guys knew you're welcome to chime in.
Yep. Nope. I'm here. I'll let everybody kind of speak their piece today, and I'll jump in when needed. If anybody any questions for me either. Okay. Bye.
All right, next question on here. I've had some problems projecting. I get to the vibrational state, but it comes in waves and then it fades quickly. Any tips on how to move through this state without losing it? So I have a couple of thoughts here. what I've noticed is, and it doesn't happen to me quite so much now as it did when I started, but the vibrational state seemed to not want to be noticed, which is kind of a weird idea that a feeling or a sensation wouldn't want to be noticed. But as soon as I put my attention on it, it would sort of fade away. And now I can pay more attention to it, and it seems to continue, you know, a little bit more easily. I think over time you just learn how to balance in that state, because it's sort of a mental balancing act kind of position you put yourself in. But in the early days, what I had to learn how to do is whatever I was doing to induce the vibrational state in the first place. So for example, one of the things that I do fairly often, you know, as a relaxation kind of deal, is I do deep breathing to start with, and then I start counting backwards from 300 to 1. And the only reason I count backwards is it's a little more mentally engaging than counting forwards. And I'm counting because I'm trying to keep my mind mentally busy just enough to keep it alert and aware, just to keep myself, you know, to maintain control over my my mental state and not just fall asleep too quickly. But what I found is that, you know, at some point, you know, I'd get down to 200 or something, and I would start feeling the mild sense of pulsing vibrations, and or my body would start falling asleep, or, you know, whatever the symptom was. And as soon as I paid attention to it, I was like, oh, holy crap, I'm there. And I would start noticing it, and it would just fade away. And so the way to continue on with that would be to just keep on doing whatever you did to induce that state in the first place. So in my case, relaxing, you know, constantly, you know, reviewing my body and saying, how can I relax this further, and continuing my counting backwards, and just completely ignore the vibrations, completely ignore any sort of auditory type hallucinations you're having. Ignore any sensations or the pounding heartbeat or anything else like that. Anything that comes up, just ignore it. You know, sort of maybe notice it off in your peripheral vision, and, you know, keep track that it's still going on, but just continue whatever you were doing to get to that point in the first place. And that seemed to do the trick for me. It just, that whole state, all of those symptoms just don't seem to want you to pay any attention to them, or else they just kind of quit. And that may be because, you know, in this process, you're trying to put your body to sleep. And at some point, if you start to notice what your body is doing, I think your body says, oh, my brain is still awake. I can't fall asleep yet. I can't shut down yet. And so it reactivates, you know, and waits for your mind to fall asleep, like is supposed to happen, or as we're accustomed to having happen.
I completely agree with you there. That's definitely a lot of my experience too.
Yeah, I can also say that anytime if I get to that vibrational state, if I start to pay attention to it, it leaves just as quickly as it came. So.
And that's an easier thing to say than do, right? I mean, it's easier to say, ignore it and just continue on with whatever you're doing. But that all of these sensations, they're things that you never experience in physical life. It's not something you can just prepare for, and that you can be like, you know, I'll practice this during the day, and then when I go to bed, I can just ignore it. It's like all of these sensations you've never felt before, and some of them are pretty insane, and it's difficult to ignore them, you know, let alone, you know, not start having a racing heartbeat, and not start, you know, changing your breathing pattern because of fear. You know, all of these things, it takes some practice. And the best thing I can say in that respect is to just get to these states as often as you possibly can. They got to become commonplace so that you can just remain cool and calm during the entire process.
Yeah,
so
a lot
I
of
know
times,
easier said than done.
Yeah, a lot of times my heartbeat would start racing, and that would run it for me. So definitely, it's like you have to be an observer, but you don't want to focus. Like you want to observe the experience, but not focus on it too much. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, be an observer, just as if you're like a third-party observer, just noticing what's happening rather than being a direct participant, I suppose. That's a really good way of putting it. In fact, other people have actually talked about watching yourself fall asleep. And I guess that's that whole observer type attitude, where you're watching it happen rather than being an active participant and, you know, experiencing it. You got to try to separate yourself from that somehow.
Yeah, it takes practice. It definitely takes practice. Even though I had my first, I guess, true astral projection experience after 2 weeks, doesn't mean it was always easy for me to do that afterwards. So, I mean, I failed a lot of times. You know, I still fail a lot of times that I make the intention that I want to do it. And I have astral projection experiences a lot of times I don't even feel like having one that night. So, you know, it definitely takes a lot of practice for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That actually brings us to our next question. How much should I practice? What's the best time of the day to practice, and how often should I do it? Best time to practice. So I guess I would separate practice and attempts, like making a practice or having practice time and making an attempt. I would separate those into two different categories or two different things. So I practice during the day all the time, and I do this during, meditation, or I do this during daytime naps, or, things like that. And I'll practice these visualization techniques. And I will tell you that I have any sort of success during the daytime. In fact, I've projected twice during the day, and all of my successes and attempts, only 2 of those have been during the daytime. It's a difficult thing to do. But I would say practicing during the daytime absolutely has value, because it reinforces in your mind, what you're going to be doing when you go to bed that night. So I do that every day. I do that during, before I go to sleep every night. I start by putting my body to sleep. Whether or not I'm planning on making an attempt, I use that time to practice this shutting down process while I keep my mind awake. So then, now as far as attempts go, how often should I make an attempt? I would say that probably depends on your own personal situation. So I've mentioned a couple of times that I think it's important to not reach a point where you're frustrated. Frustration is going to kill this process for you, absolutely. Like, no doubt about it. If you get frustrated, it's just going to get harder and harder to have any sort of success, because it's going to get harder and harder to relax and harder to clear your mind. And so if you get to the point where you're frustrated, it's time to take a break. It's time to change your practice up. Maybe, at least reduce the number of attempts that you're making, or just take a break completely and just study something else for a while, and then come back to it again with a fresh mind and, with the enthusiasm that you had at the beginning. As far as the other thing I would say is, if you get to the point where you're mentally or physically exhausted, and it's leading to like massive sleep deprivation because you're just trying every single night, and it's 3 a.m. and you keep waking yourself up, and you're falling asleep at work, and it's becoming a hindrance in your waking life, I would say, again, it's time to take a break, because you don't want to get to ever get to the point where this is negatively impacting your waking life. So if it leads to frustration or exhaustion, cut back or take a break. Now, that being said, if you can practice, or if you can make an attempt every single night and not reach either of those scenarios, I absolutely recommend it, because that's more opportunity to have a great experience. Starting out, I would say that it's really good to only practice on days when you can sleep in the following morning, because then you're not going to have that sense of urgency, like, I need to make this happen because I know I have to wake up in 3 hours. So it's really got to happen quickly, or else I'm going to fail tonight. Wait till a weekend where you can sleep in 2 or 3 hours extra in the morning, and that way you don't feel like you don't have that same sense of urgency in the middle of the night when you wake up and you're writing down your dreams, and you're staying awake for half an hour, and then you're trying to put your body to sleep. It'll lead to a much more relaxed attempt. So it really depends, but if it leads to frustration or exhaustion, then take a break, cut back. That's my thoughts.
I agree with you there. I've had times where I've practiced every night, and I've had times where I went a couple weeks without even putting in much thought into it. One thing that I do recommend, and I'm not sure why this would be, but for me, when it is closer to the full moon, a few days before the full moon is approaching, I feel like I have an experience every night. So if you are going to practice every day, definitely do it closer to the full moon. Again, maybe this is just something that I think within my subconscious, but it increases the capability of having an astral projection experience. I never knew I thought that, but that is the truth. If I check the full moon calendar or whatever, it seems like when I'm having them every night, it's right up to the full moon.
What's interesting about you saying that is that so I haven't noticed the same thing, but that doesn't mean it's not a valid point for sure. What I have noticed is that if I think that something is going to help, and I think that I'm going to have a better opportunity or a better chance of success, then that confidence that I'm going to have a better chance of success in turn, and then I end up having more success, because confidence plays a huge role in that. So if you look at Robert Monroe, he said, I have more success when my head points north. And I haven't found that to be the case either, but if he makes 10 attempts and 8 out of 10 of those are successful when his head is pointing north, that reinforces in his mind that this is an important thing. And then when his head does point north, he's more likely to have a higher level of success, because he's more likely to be more confident that it's going to work out. So moon, or things like crystals, or things like pointing your head north, or all of these things, they can impact on your practice if it's something that you, I guess that you associate positively with positive results. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have this piece of selenite that I sleep under my pillow with, and I feel like it definitely helps a lot. Also, I found like if I lay stiff on my back with my face just pointing straight, forward, it's harder for me to have an astral projection experience than if I turn slightly on my left side and I'm in a more relaxed position than just sleeping with my hands over my chest like I'm, dead or something. But I don't know. There's just a weird little thing.
I would have to agree with you on that. I have to lay on my side to project. I can't do it on my back. I I'm in on that, and I do agree with you on the full moon as well. That is a big.
Days before the full moon is approaching, I feel like I have an experience every night. So if you are going to practice,
I think somebody's got their. There we go. Speaker and microphone on.
Oh, really? That's not me, is it?
It's shut off. I think somebody noticed it.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, the full moon, huge part of that, because I'll project a couple times a night around the full moon. And I do move a lot in my sleep. So I notice the nights that I wake up and I'm on my back, kind of like you said, those are the nights I struggle. So
yeah.
that's you're in tune with that. That's good that you're paying attention to that kind of stuff. And right now, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to understand how I'm able to do it so often, what days work, what days don't, what things work. So when is the next full moon? I think we should all put a test to this and kind of pay attention to it and see if everybody's able to.
I'm not sure when the next one is. I feel like we just had one not long ago.
Yeah, we'll have to document that in the group and kind of see where everybody's at. I'm interested to see that. Do a little.
I got a question for you. Do you have to lay more on your left side or your right side? Does it matter? Do you have more on your left side?
I lay on my left side, and
Me too.
I'm an arm sleeper, so my arm, it goes straight up, and I lay my head on my arm, and that is what triggers it. If I lay any other way, it won't work. I don't know what that has to do with, but it's straight out. I mean, straight up. No bending, no nothing, just straight up. So is that how you do every night? I mean, is that your normal sleep side, your left side?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I sleep on my right side too, but I have noticed that usually when I'm having an experience, I'm on my left side.
Okay.
So, but I have done it on my back too. It's just it's more. It helps when I'm on my laying on my left side, or at least slightly like turn that way. Even if my head is just slightly turned to the left and I'm still on my back, it still. I don't know what it is, but it still increases the experience.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm trying to think of some other pointers. I know we were talking in the group a little bit about it with the caffeine. Are you a big caffeine drinker?
Yeah, I have a lot of caffeine in me usually, yes.
Yeah, I know.
I've got a comment on caffeine.
Go ahead.
So just a thought on caffeine. So I had done some reading, like, I don't know, it was 8-9 months ago, about how caffeine messes up the chemicals in your brain that affect dreaming, serotonin, melatonin, that thing like that. So you may remember, or maybe you don't, I did an experiment where I cut caffeine out of my diet for 30 days, and it severely negatively impacted my projection attempts. And it took a long time to get back to the point where I could actually put my body to sleep while I kept my mind awake. And so I was off caffeine for probably 5 months, maybe. And I never got back up to that same level of success. And so I went back to drinking caffeine, and I have a cup of coffee every night at about, like 2.5 hours before I go to bed. And I find it hugely beneficial to have some amount of caffeine in my system when I'm trying to use the mind awake, body asleep method. When I'm using the indirect method, it really doesn't matter. But when I'm trying to put my body to sleep and keep my mind awake, I'm one of those where caffeine doesn't affect me physically very much. I can drink a cup of coffee and just go right to sleep. But it it's far easier to keep my mind awake when I've got some caffeine in my system. So if you haven't tried that, caffeine might be good training wheels to learning to date.
I agree. This is funny. So I don't know what it is, but in the past couple weeks, I've only projected maybe a handful of times. And, I told you I project, at least 5 times a week. And I cut out caffeine. I cut out coffee because I'm on this whole diet. Oh, I don't need cream. I don't need coffee. I don't need sugary drinks, So I'm just going all water. And I noticed that it's hindering my projection. So I did. I just switched back to caffeine coffee a couple days ago. And I had an experience the other night again. So I suggest to anybody trying to get to that point to definitely include caffeine in their routine for sure. I agree with you.
You might remember Brian Slartzani, so he's on here once in a while. He was part of our last chat, and I've talked to him just offline, and he has the same comment that caffeine plays a significant role in his successes.
Right.
Absolutely, give it a shot. And something else I'll say is if you're using the wake back to bed method, one thing I found is that if you are one of those where you wake up, you stay up for a little bit, but then you still always just fall asleep too quickly. Experiment with different levels of caffeine, drink a tiny bit of coffee, drink a little bit more, and adjust the amount, and see what the minimum amount you can take is to allow your body to fall asleep still, but keep your mind a little bit more alert and awake. So try that in the middle of the night during your wake back to bed method as well.
That caffeine thing is a little interesting. I would almost think that you'd think that maybe less caffeine would be beneficial, but the more caffeine being beneficial, that's interesting. But quick thing, back to the lunar thing. Next full moon is July 9th for all you who are going to be trying that. But I get the feeling that whether it be the moon thing, the crystals, head facing north, I feel like that's all like kind of a subjective mind kind of thing, where if you put it in your subconscious, then it maybe just kind of builds in there, and that's what causes you to be more successful, which whatever those things may be.
I have to disagree with that because, like I said, I've been naturally projecting for as far as I can remember, and now I'm starting to pay attention to how I'm able to project, and that is a key thing. When I lay on my left side, that's. Remember I told you about when I got spooned a couple times. Usually when I have spirits come up and hug me or whisper behind my ear and talk to me, a guide or whoever, it's usually 10 out of 10 times. I mean, that's it. It's when I'm on my left side. So I don't
Looks like I got to try that left side then.
Well,
good.
what I will say is that's not the case for everybody though, right? So that may be 100% for you, and that your left side is the ideal position, that the full moon is the ideal time, and that crystals help you. But I'll say that I've experimented with crystals, and they don't seem to make any difference at all, but it might be my lack of belief or my skepticism that a crystal under my pillow is going to help me. And as far as the full moon goes, I keep track of all my dates and times, and they know that I project, and I keep track of the phases of the moon. And it doesn't seem to be that I have any more success during the full moon than outside of the full moon. So while it's definitely worth trying, I will say that it helps you, obviously. That's not going to be a universal thing. So don't base your practice around the full moon and say, well, I can't practice because it's not the full moon. You know what I mean?
I was just saying around the full moon, I agreed with her. I have a lot more. Like I project more often. So, I mean, that was my input on that.
Well, let's give it a try. So the next full moon you said was the 29th?
July 9th.
The 9th.
Is that what you said? Oh, the 9th. So let's give it a try, and everybody in the Facebook group, let's record our results and see if you've got more success and see if this happens for people. It'd be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, it really would. I'd like to see that. Okay.
I have a question real quick. I was reading the Phase and by Michael Raduga, and he said something about you should try to get the best night of sleep before you do the indirect method. And I was curious to hear your guys' opinion on.
Did we lose him?
I think we just got.
Sounds like it.
Well, I think he got most of his question in.
I can chime in on that. I
Yeah.
disagree. I can't project with a lot of sleep. So this is the funny part. Right now, I'm sleeping also a lot more with not having caffeine in my system. So I
Mhm.
noticed the past couple weeks, I'm a stay-at-home mom this summer with my kids, so I don't have to get up early for work and stuff like that. I cut out caffeine. So getting a lot of sleep really has affected that as well. So there's two, factors in there. So the not having the caffeine and sleeping too much. I mean, I'm getting 8 hours of sleep, which I normally get, 4 or 5, and that's usually when I project. So,
So you're
um,
saying when you get less sleep, you have more success when you're in the 4 and 5 hour night
yeah,
than you? Okay, interesting.
absolutely, absolutely. So I'm trying to go back to that. So lately, since I put caffeine back into my routine, I've actually been staying up later. Actually, which is good that I'm part of the group because I've been talking to a few people, in other countries late night. So I've been staying up till probably about 3, 4 o'clock in the morning now, trying to get myself back in that groove of 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Um, I've always been able to function on that, so it's very weird for me right now to be getting 8, 9 hours. So just chiming on.
You know what's interesting about you saying that is that I tend to do better when I have a routine. But I always thought of it as a routine. Like I go to bed at 9 o'clock or 9:15 or something like that every night because the next morning I got to get up really early for work. And I actually have far more success during the week than I have on the weekend. And the weekend is a break in my routine, but it's also the time when I get more sleep. I get like between 9 and 10 hours of sleep instead of 7 or 8. Now that you say that, I don't know if it's the more sleep that's hindering my process on the weekend or if it's a break in routine. I always just thought that, now I'm staying up till 11 o'clock and I'm sleeping in till 10 o'clock and that break in routine was affecting me, but it might be sleep as well.
It could be both. Yeah.
It could be both. Yeah.
Hmm.
As far as the indirect method goes, I'll say that I have most of my success between between midnight and 3 a.m. And it does help me if I wake up and then if I go back to bed, because that way my sleep is a little lighter throughout the rest of the night. But I have most of my success with the direct method, putting my body to sleep and projecting. I actually have more success right before I go to sleep at the beginning of the night, which I know people say don't practice before you go to bed because your mind and body are too tired and it just won't work. But I have more success before I go to sleep with the direct method than any other time. So
Is there a specific time that, like, because of course, when you project after your experience, you're wide awake. I mean, I usually jump up
yeah,
like, oh my God, what just happened? But
yeah.
the time frame for me is I've logged it because I've been journaling now as well, and the time is usually between like 1:15 in the morning to about 3 o'clock in the morning is usually the time frame for me. Um, so I don't know if there's like a specific time at night that everybody projects, or I'm just trying to gauge
Or
for
if
this.
it's
So
or if it's the amount of sleep you get beforehand, and so
I usually
how much sleep do you have before you get to 1 to 3 a.m.?
like none. Like it's pretty instant. Like as soon as I lay down,
Okay.
I go into the meditation state, and it's usually pretty quick. So it's not like,
Well, so that's like, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just saying, so it's not like I'm sleeping a few hours, waking up and falling back asleep. I mean, it's pretty instantaneous. So
Okay, so that matches my experience with when I go to bed, I have more success putting my body to sleep and projecting just immediately without any sleep in between.
hmm
The only time the sleep beforehand seems to help me is when I'm trying to use the indirect method and catch that transition into wakefulness, because in order to do that, you have to wake up, right? And so if I can have a whole bunch of awakenings over a period of a couple of hours, then I've got a whole bunch of attempts that I can make to try to catch that transition to separate. And so that usually works for me better after a few hours of sleep because I'm not quite as tired and I can get up for a little bit, go back to bed, and I can have more subsequent awakenings just spontaneously.
right. Now, did you want to chime in at all about what we talked about the other day about the Kundalini or the chakras? Anything? Did I miss that? Did you guys talk about that?
No, we haven't talked about that. Actually, I'll let you start if you want to kind of preface it, and I'll chat about that. That can maybe be our last topic. It looks like we're almost to 11. I'm going to try to cut this off at fairly close to an hour.
Okay. Well, it's still something, of course, that I'm still trying to understand. Like I know you said you just kind of looked into it as well, but I've had quite a few experiences with those points, my crown chakra, as well as my, what they call the third eye, where I feel that flow of energy coming in and out. And actually, I think I spoke with a couple gentlemen the other day about it, where I had one or two bad experiences with what I'm calling dark spirits, whatever we want to call them, demons, I don't know, where they were hovering over me and like almost sucking energy out of the top of my head, the crown chakra. And there was two others in my living room, because this is a night I kind of, laid to rest on my couch. So I saw up on top of my ceiling, there was two others, and it was almost like they were waiting to come and like do what this one was doing to me. It was the craziest experience, but that in particular, I just thought was very odd, because it was a surge of energy in and out of my body. And I mean, I couldn't move. Whatever was going on, I could not move. It was just happening to me. Now,
have you ever seen chakras when you're out of body? Have you ever looked and actually seen those chakral points that people talk about?
I have not. I would like to, but I have not. But as for the third eye, every time I project, that is the exact location between my eye and the middle of my forehead, that when I'm getting ready to project, I feel that surge of energy. It's almost like I'm shooting a laser beam out of my head. That's how strong it is.
Yeah.
So that's a regular occurrence for me. I don't feel it necessarily anywhere else in my body. It's just my head. So I don't know what that means. So I just kind of wanted to see other people's, experiences, if they've had anything similar to that.
I also feel like my soul almost comes to that point. I feel like there's different perceptions, I guess, on where you exit from, but I a lot of times feel like it is from my third eye.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can't talk specifically about projections per se, but I definitely have, even sometimes when I'm not trying to necessarily meditating, I'll feel some kind of buzzing sensation in the third eye area. I haven't felt necessarily the almost explosive power you're talking about, but I definitely have felt it.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt very similar, like you're saying, like the laser beam shooting out the top of your head. I never thought about it as a laser beam before. But
it's my way of explaining it,
No, that's great. That's very descriptive. That's good. So Robert Bruce, I've been through a couple of his audio training courses, and one of his courses is called, it's his Kundalini raising course. I can't remember what it's called. And I went through that because I was curious about it, and I was interested in more about what is this Kundalini that people talk about, because there seems to be some connection between it and chakras and projections and out-of-body experiences, all of this stuff. And when he described his Kundalini raising experience, he talks about how it starts at the base of his spine at his root chakra, and then it's like this insane jolt of energy that goes up his spine all the way up to the crown of his head. And the way that he describes it is identical to what I feel right before I project. And so right when the vibrations come on, they start at the bottom of my spine. They jolt up my spine like 10,000 volts of electricity, and then they hit me in the head. And right about that time, things just take off and tend to happen on their own.
Right. Well,
and so it may be it may be different interpretations. It may be that I'm experiencing a Kundalini raising or the chakra activation, and that's just not what I've ever called it, because I wasn't familiar with the terminology.
Now, I think we were talking before, like each experience that I've had has been kind of different. Like we've talked about that spine jolt that we got down in our lower back where,
right,
like electricity shooting into your spine. I mean, I've had that a few times. And then the experiences with the crown chakra or, whatever else, I feel that, for instance, when I had that experience with my crown chakra, it was a different projection experience. And then when I have the experiences with my third eye shooting out like a crazy laser beam, it's a different experience. And then, same thing with the spine or lower abdomen. So I feel like each time one of those areas are triggered, the experience is different in itself. I'll go to a different area or I'll meet a guide. Each one triggers, is what I'm trying to get across. Each one triggers a different type of projection, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm explaining it properly, but
no, that makes sense.
I feel when, you know, the crown chakra is triggered, I feel like I've come across, like you said, dark spirits where, you know, entities are around. When my third eye, that laser beam is shooting out, I usually end up getting touched by something, a spirit, or meeting a guide or talking to a guide or something like that. So I've been logging it, you know, trying to understand it more. And from what I can see so far, each chakra has taken me to a different experience or different realm. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I'll have more information once, you know, I can document more. But I'm still new at this, so I've only been documenting for, you know, 2 months now. So but
That's interesting.
I don't know.
So in regards to your, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. No, you can go.
Okay, I was going to say in regards to your chakras, are you physically able to feel them or sense them, you know, every different chakra in your body? And I'm curious about this because my wife and I were talking the other day, and I can very distinctly feel when I meditate, especially if I meditate focusing on specific points, I can very distinctly feel like my third eye chakra, and it just feels like somebody's jamming a thumb into my forehead.
Yeah.
Or I can very distinctly feel the crown chakra, and it's like a brushing sensation that just is continually circling over the top of my head. And I can physically feel that. My root chakra, same kind of thing, but then everything between. So if you think about your sacral chakra, your solar plexus, and your heart and your throat, those four, I have no success inducing any sort of sensation or feeling in any of those. And I'd be curious to know if you can you feel all of those physically?
I am in the same boat as you. I can only feel those three. The others, I unless I'm just not paying attention, but I can't feel those either. So
it's interesting because my wife is the opposite. She's like, well, I can feel everything between, but I can't feel anything in my head.
Weird.
So it's interesting. But then she also has no experience, or she hasn't had any success with projection yet.
Really?
So I don't know if that has anything to do with anything either.
Maybe.
I might have some information on this.
Okay. Love
Yeah.
Traditionally, you can only project from two chakras, from heart chakra or from crown chakra. You cannot project from other chakras. There are only two chakras you can project out of your body.
How do you have that information?
I don't remember anymore. Maybe the Vedas or something. I have studied Tibetan Dzogchen and the Tantraya, Tantric Buddhism. So they speak about chakras. I feel when I wanted to learn to open my basic chakras, I worked in construction and very material stuff, and that helped me to start. I did a lot of martial arts and stuff like that, which helped me to get better acquainted with my body and the first chakras. You will only project and have dreams and access to what you can see with your consciousness once you get higher up. I have been conscious dreaming and astral projecting since I was very little also, mainly because of external stimuli and other things that made my unconscious pretty vivid. But you can learn to do this. You can learn to do everything by starting from the bottom. There is no way you can always do stuff with your mind. You just have to meditate and change your brain patterns and yes, and for energy, it's when you have that bolt, it's of lightning. Traditionally, it's not especially Kundalini. It can be a lot of energies. A lot of energies like the Earth Force, for example, is very powerful. I can feel just as powerful as what you could think is Kundalini. So the best advice is to find a real master for energetic work that will be able to tell you and help you, because sometimes, well, you screw up. It can be hard to deal with that amount of energy. You have to have proper stretching, to have a proper, that's what yoga is about. You have to stretch, you have to open your body, open your joints, so that it can go. Because sometimes there's so much energy, you have to really deal with that go. Not anyone can cultivate energy and start. If you project your energy in your third eye, a lot of the energy in your body stagnates from emotional stuff, and so you will project bad stuff also, which can give negative experiences. Negative experience once you are awake, once you are conscious. There's this experience.
I like your style.
I have poor English, sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh, no, I appreciate your thoughts.
We understand, but yeah, I'm very big with yoga. I don't go necessarily to a yoga studio, but I like stretching and meditating, so I do a lot of that in my home on my own. So it helps me centered and relax, which is big for projecting, to relax your body. So
yeah, I agree with that. While you think of projecting as being a non-physical thing, physical health or activity, well, it will definitely improve your chances. So if because exercise just in general, it makes you feel good, right? It releases dopamine into your system, and you feel good, and that positive state of mind that results in is a much easier state of mind to project from. Not to mention it wears out your physical body, and so if you can go to bed with a wide awake mind and a tired, exhausted body. I've had times where I spend the entire day hiking, and I've hiked 20 miles and my body is just completely just wiped out, but my mind is still very active and awake. And I'll lay down, and without even making an attempt, without even trying, within 10 minutes, I'm out, because my body just clicks off just like a light switch. So physical exhaustion is a good thing.
It's huge.
All right, guys. So I copied out all the comments from the comment thread that's on the YouTube channel. I've still got a number of them on my list from emails, but I'm going to try to cut this off actually right now. We've been going a little over an hour, and I really want to try to keep these to an hour just to be respectful of people's time. It's a commitment to join.
Didn't Brian just join in?
Brian did just join. Hey, Brian.
Hi. Hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Well, you guys want to go on for another 20 minutes or so? Maybe we'll go to 11:30. I want to try to make these, just a set, fairly short period of time, just so people are willing to join and feel like they can stay through the whole thing.
You could. It doesn't affect the videos that you upload, because you can chop the videos up, right?
No, not at all. No, I'm just thinking, I don't know. I'm just thinking as far as I can commit to an hour every month, and I don't have a problem with that. I don't know if I can always commit to more than that, and I figure other people may be the same way, where they feel like I want to join, but I can't commit to a 2.5 hour conversation.
Yeah, but of course they could leave and then come back or watch the rest of it on YouTube. That's what I'm thinking. But yeah, it is.
Sure.
It is a bit long to sit in for a full chat if it's 2 hours. I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian, we were just talking about chakras. Do you have any input on that?
Not really. I have had some abstract chakra experiences where I've seen them as seals. I observed them as colorful seals, and then every other time I just seen them as golden vortexes, all of them as gold, which I couldn't really wrap my head around. I haven't seen too much on that. Can anybody describe what that would be, or?
Well, we did just kind of get an explanation from. I'm sorry. What's your name?
Brian.
No.
Flagata.
I'm
Slartsani.
Oh, okay.
I'm Thomas.
Thomas. Okay.
Oh, Tom. Okay. So, Brian, actually, one comment on your experiences with chakras. In your book, you talk about how, at least if I remember correctly, you talk about how your chakras, what you've experienced or what you've seen, doesn't match up with the typical chakra layout, that people describe, the pattern from root to crown.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think you said you've seen them, they're rearranged somehow, or they look more like spinning vortexes, or, can you go into that a little bit more? It's been a few months since I've read your book and I can't remember the details.
Yeah, there's just one time that I managed to turn my look inside my astral body with this weird technique that I developed, and all I saw was these various chakra layouts just blinking before me. And I may have accidentally changed the chakra layout. I don't really know. That was one of my theories, because I have observed this golden chakra layout from many different angles, and I can't explain it. It's just like 2 columns in my chest, and they're all gold, and everybody's seeing like colorful chakras and 1 column. So it's a bit odd, and I could never really explain it, but I'm interested to hear what other people have on that. Do they have any ideas?
I've never personally seen any chakras. I've never actually, honestly, never looked for them, but I did have an experience where I was interested in figuring out where the vibrational state came from, and I looked for the source of the vibrational state, and I found 2 objects, one on each side of me, basically right around the position of my hands where they were in bed, and they were purple in color, but they looked almost like man-made metallic type objects rather than naturally existing chakral type points. And I don't know if that's even worth anything, but I touched them, and then the vibrations shot up my spine into my head, and that's the closest I've ever seen to any sort of energetic center while I'm out of body.
Yeah, I haven't seen chakras on me, but like you said, I've never really looked for it, so I've felt them, not seen them.
I haven't felt them out of body or seen them out of body, but just meditating, back when I was first learning about chakras, I would focus on them and I would see them in my mind's eye, but I wasn't actually out of my body per se. But yeah.
I've never actually come across anybody who's said that they've actually witnessed or seen the single column of the multicolored, the rainbow type pattern. And so I'm wondering, so you say you've seen this double column of gold going up your body, and I'm wondering if maybe it doesn't have to be a single column. Maybe that's just tradition. That's just what people have taught, or what people have just thought of this as, and how they describe it. But I've never actually come across anybody else who's said that they've actually been able to see these centers and described them as this rainbow single column pattern.
Yeah, usually it's like an abstract experience or something where people see them.
Right.
I mean, if you look up the chakras online, we're most familiar probably with the 7 chakra system, but there are a lot of different systems out there, with some that may even had hundreds of them throughout the body. So I don't even know if we really know if there's a true system, or maybe it's all subjective. Who really knows for sure? But there's a lot of systems out there.
Yeah, Robert Bruce talks about how there's your 7 primary chakras, and that you have multiple chakra, like hundreds of chakral points in all of your joints and in different points in your body, and your toes and your fingers. And he talks about doing this tactile imaging where you rub like the knuckle of your big toe, or you rub the palm of your hand, or things like that. And these aren't places where you typically would see a primary chakral point. But he talks about how you have the secondary chakral system, that goes through your body like capillaries, or like veins going out through it to all the different points in your body, and that you can stimulate any one of these to strengthen your energy body, or to strengthen your chakral system. So I think you're right. I think there's lots of different views of this.
Yeah, and Ryan Cropper, he made a video about where he talked about how he removed the idea of having them as separate points. That was removed from his mind or something. He wanted to perceive it as an integral unit, if I can remember correctly.
Yeah, I watched him. I remember him talking about that.
I think it's a pretty good idea.
A pretty good idea to remove the idea of seeing them as separate points. So what would be the alternative? How do you see them instead? I don't think I've seen that one.
I'm not entirely sure. Maybe just a bunch of or pulsing energy all throughout the body, just like a white light. I don't exactly remember how he wanted to see it, but it seemed to work out well for him.
Yeah, I could see that. So there's people who talk about pulsating energy from your feet to your head, like Louis Monero. He talks about, he calls it VELO, the voluntary energetic longitudinal oscillation, I think is what it stands for. And it's like the energy bounce technique that Robert Bruce talks about, where you're bouncing energy from your feet to your head. And if you're not seeing this as specific points that you have to feel energy in, maybe it's easier to, I don't know, maybe feel energy in your feet or in your hands or in other points of your body. I could see there might be benefit to that. If you're so concerned about feeling it right in your root chakra or right in your heart chakra or something, maybe that's a, you know, I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe that's a hindrance rather than a help.
I don't understand the point, like, of focusing on chakras unless some, you know, for some reason you can actually clear them and, you know, help you. But I feel like if you believe you have chakras and then you believe that you possibly have blocked chakras, and that's just gonna hinder you more than if you just didn't believe that you had that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't
Totally get it.
know.
Yeah, because I had the same. I've had a conversation with another guy on my channel who's very, very into energy work and very into chakras and unblocking chakras. And my comment to him was that I was able to project before ever even hearing the term chakra, or before I ever even heard of the idea of energy work. And so my argument was that it's not absolutely necessary to do energy work or to unblock chakras or any of this to project, because I did it before I ever concept. And so what his point was that I was basically raising Kundalini or going through all of these chakral stimulation pattern or exercises, like inadvertently, you know, and so I'm stimulating my chakral system and I'm raising energy, and it's all accidental, I suppose, and then that has led to my out-of-body experiences. But that if you have a better handle on the whole energy system and raising energy in the chakral system, then you can make it be a more deliberate thing where you can raise energy and get out of body more easily, was his comment. And I don't know if that's the case or not. I haven't gotten to the point where I can think about just raising energy and just make it happen. I still go through this very physical type process of putting my body to sleep to reach these states, and it doesn't feel like energy raising to me. But that being said, if I could just think about it and raise energy, would that help me? I don't know.
I don't know.
It's something I'm definitely looking into.
Yeah, I've definitely felt, and it could just be because I've read up on it, but I definitely feel energy flowing throughout my body. I mean, we are made up of energy. So obviously, you know, anyone I'm sure can feel their energy flowing throughout their body. But as far as like the Kundalini stuff, I have felt that sensation like of a snake going up my spine, but I'm honestly scared of anything to do with that, because I've read about experiences where people have messed with Kundalini energy and like forced an awakening, and it just ended up causing a lot of bad stuff to happen. So it's kind of scared me to work with that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Robert Bruce recommends not to just do the head, because you can basically psychologically scar yourself if you just tactile image your head, because you're opening up your mind's eye, not setting up the other chakras. And I've actually tried it just out of curiosity, and I did get this like flashbang effect, like I was hit by a flashbang. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. And I can understand why some people would it would mess some people up a bit, because it can be a bit frightening. But in general, I find it tactile imaging, like doing the entire body, helps me get out of body. But it's usually like it induces a really intense and abstract experience that is really hard to put in words. It's not like something that shoots me out into my bedroom, for instance.
Yeah. What is tactile imaging? I'm not really good with all the different terms used in astral projection, like direct or indirect method. I've read about it, but I can't remember like what's the difference. So what is tactile imaging exactly? What do you mean by that?
Tactile imaging is something that, go ahead, I'll let you explain it. Go for it.
Tactile imaging is a means of inducing tactile input through imagination, and this tactile input stimulates the energy centers. It's part of Robert Bruce's New Energy Ways, which is the way he systematically employs tactile imaging.
Yeah, so to expound on that a little bit, so Robert Bruce, he came up with the rope method, and maybe he's not the first one who came up with it, but he really pushes it and says that, you know, this is the most effective thing. At one point, he was working with somebody who was blind and, you know, has never seen themselves climb a rope and would have a difficult time with that sort of visualization. And so he said, well, I need to come up with some sort of method to stimulate your energy body, or to put that energy body to create or to cause the projection reflex to occur. And so he started doing what he calls tactile imaging, where you start just, you know, brushing your hand or a paintbrush or something over, like, say, a knuckle. I think he started with his feet or his big toe or something like that. And so he'd stimulate that area on his foot over and over again for, you know, a minute and a half or something like that physically. And then he would stop, and then he would then try to generate that same sensation just with his mind, and try to still feel that sensation with his mind. And so he would work his way through different points in his body and stimulate his feet and his hands and his arms and his legs. And this is what he was saying: don't just focus on your third eye, which is an easy point for a lot of people to start with, because it's, well, one, it's easy to get a sensation there, and two, people have this idea of the third eye being just this, or this tool that you can use to get out of body, and so many people are just tempted to jump right to it. And that's what Brian was saying. He focused on that and ended up getting this flashbang type effect. And Robert Bruce talks about negative things that can happen if you don't work on the rest of your chakra system as well. Sorry, got off on a tangent there. No. But the whole idea of tactile imaging is to stimulate your body physically, and then try to stimulate that same part of your body mentally, and generate that energy sensation without physically touching yourself anymore.
I guess that.
Did I explain that decently?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's like when I, like, a lot of, well, here recently, like, I'll just imagine the feeling of projecting astrally, and that will induce that effect, which again, that's not necessarily, I guess it can be considered physical, but is that kind of the same thing?
Do you have anything to add to that, Brian? I don't know if I did the explanation justice, but that's kind of how I saw it.
Yeah, that seems about right. I don't disagree with anything you said. So Tashia, is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on your question?
I think I called you Tasha before. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. I'm called both. So I was just saying, like, now when I astral project, I imagine that sensation, and that kind of induces it for me. I don't know if that's also kind of considered tactile imaging or not, but.
Are you saying that you take the vibrations and you just kind of amplify them with your mind, or?
No, I imagine the sensation of what it feels like to astral project, and that in turn induces the experience.
I wouldn't say that's tactile imaging. Tactile imaging is like inducing sensations on your skin, and eventually kind of gets deeper into your flesh, and it feels like you're inducing these odd sensations within your flesh under the skin, and that stimulates the energy body. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
I do know what you're saying, though, about imagining what it feels like and then having that in turn induce an out-of-body experience. That's actually something I've been working on since one of my most recent projections that I recorded, where I talked to a guide, and she said I need to learn how to generate this feeling, this mental feeling, you know, intentionally. I've been working on that because it's very much like you said, where if you can induce that feeling and feel like that's difficult to describe. If you can induce the feeling that you get when you go through that separation process, it seems to be easier. And I've been focusing on that and trying to really memorize that sensation during the transition, and trying to get to the point where I can just induce that. And so I've been paying a whole lot more attention during the separation, during that transition out of body, trying to really memorize that feeling, in hopes that one day I'll be able to just think about that and then mentally generate that same feeling and then have that happen. So I get what you're saying completely. I'm just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any final thoughts? I'm going to save the rest of our questions for next time. I've got a whole list of them, and I imagine this list will just keep growing, but we'll just keep tackling it month by month. No? I appreciate you joining, Brian. I know you ended up getting here a little late, but I always value your feedback. Brian, if you don't know, has far more experience than I've got in this matter. So,
Thank you.
well, actually, the majority probably do. So I appreciate you guys joining and throwing in your 2 cents.
No, I like our chats monthly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. It was a good idea.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, I will. This actually, it's automatically posted on YouTube. So if you joined late and you want to catch the beginning of it, feel free to go back and watch. I will post another video here in the next 30 days or so and let you know when the next one's going to be.
All right. Well, bye.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.